February 13th, 1943. 7:18 a.m. The Western Pacific, east of Guadalcanal. The engine note is sharp and metallic, a grinding roar that vibrates through the cockpit and into your ribs. The air smells of oil and hot metal. Sunlight flashes across the bent wings of the fighter as it claws. For altitude, the propeller disc a shimmering blur. Below the sea is a hard blue plate broken only by whitecaps and the long wakes of ships moving with deliberate calm. On the Japanese side of the sky, the mood is relaxed. This is a familiar patrol route. The weather is cooperative visibility stretching for miles. A flight of Mitsubishi A6M0s cruises at medium altitude, their pilots scanning lazily, fingers resting lightly on triggers. Lieutenant Saburo Nakamura, Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service, adjusts his oxygen mask and smirks as he looks westward. Radio chatter is minimal. There is no urgency. The Americans have been predictable lately. Slow Wildcats, clumsy landings, aircraft that bleed speed in a climb. Nothing to challenge what Japanese naval aviation has come to believe about itself. Then Nakamura sees it. A dark shape rises from the haze, its wings bent downward near the fuselage and kicked sharply upward at the tips. It looks wrong, almost broken. The silhouette doesn't match anything in the recognition manuals drilled into memory during endless training flights over the inland sea. "What in hell is that?" another pilot mutters over the radio, laughter creeping into his voice. The aircraft climbs fast, too fast for something that ugly. Its nose is long, its fuselage thick. The landing gear doors are visible, awkwardly placed. Someone jokes that the Americans have finally run out of aluminum and started bending their wings by accident. On American radios, the tone is different. Tense, controlled. Lieutenant Commander Kenneth A. Walsh, United States Navy, rolls his F4U Corsair slightly to the left, checking the formation. The cockpit shakes violently as the Pratt & Whitney R 2800 Double Wasp pours out more than 2,000 horsepower. The vibration never really stops in this aircraft. You feel it through the seat, through the stick, through your teeth. Walsh knows the reputation of this airplane. Everyone does. On the carriers, it's been called a killer of pilots. The long nose blocks the deck. The landing gear bounces. The stall comes without mercy. More than one young aviator has died trying to bring this machine home to a pitching flight deck. The Navy has quietly pulled it from carrier service. For now, it flies from rough coral strips carved out of jungle where mistakes end in shattered propellers and wrecked airframes instead of the sea. The Marines call it the bent-wing widowmaker, half joking, half afraid. The Japanese pilots don't know any of that. They only see an aircraft that looks ungainly, its wings folded like a bird, that never learned how to fly properly. The assumption is immediate and unchallenged. This is another American experiment that looks impressive on paper and fails in combat. Nakamura tilts his Zero and signals his wingman. They begin a shallow descent, confident in the dogfight that is about to come. The Zero is light, agile, forgiving. It turns inside almost anything. Japanese training has drilled this into muscle memory. Turn tighter. Bleed less energy, force the enemy into a spiral he cannot escape. Below, American radar stations on Guadalcanal crackle with static as contacts blur in and out. Orders are short and clipped. No speeches, no grand strategy. Just vectors and altitude calls pass through radios that hiss and pop in the humid air. Walsh pushes the throttle forward. The Corsair surges like a living thing. The bent wings designed to keep the massive propeller clear of the ground slice through the air cleanly. The aircraft does not turn like a Zero. It doesn't try to. Instead, it climbs. The Japanese pilots hesitate. The climb rate is unexpected. The shape may be awkward, but the performance is not. Still, confidence holds. One climb does not win a fight. Engage, Nakamura orders. The sky compresses suddenly. Tracer fire snaps past canopies. The Corsair shudders as .50 caliber machine guns open up the recoil, thudding through the wings. The sound is deeper, heavier than anything the Japanese pilots are used to hearing. It is not the light chatter of rifle-caliber guns. It is a hammering roar. A Zero flashes across Walsh's nose. He resists the instinct to turn. Every instructor has warned against it. Instead, he dives. The acceleration is brutal. Wind noise becomes a scream. The Corsair builds speed like it has no intention of stopping. The bent wings that looked so ridiculous a moment ago now hold firm stable as the aircraft hurtles downward. Nakamura tries to follow. His Zero begins to shake. The controls stiffen. He pulls back, surprised by how quickly the American machine has vanished below him. Mockery drains from the radio chatter, replaced by clipped questions. Confusion. What is its speed? Why won't it turn? No one has an answer yet. Not in the cockpit, not in the operations rooms, not in the manuals written years before the war began, when Japanese engineers and strategists decided correctly at the time that agility mattered more than armor, that range mattered more than protection. At this moment, the sky still belongs to old assumptions. The Corsair climbs again, converting speed into altitude with ruthless efficiency. Walsh lines up another pass. He does not speak. There is nothing to say. Below, the sea remains calm. The ships continue on their courses. The war for now appears unchanged. But in the space between two heartbeats, something fundamental has shifted. The engagement breaks apart into fragments of motion and noise. Aircraft streak past each other at closing speeds no one has trained for. The Japanese formation loses its clean geometry almost immediately. Lieutenant Saburo Nakamura pulls hard on the stick, trying to force his Zero into a tight, horizontal turn, the maneuver that has ended dozens of enemy aircraft since the opening months of the war. The familiar pressure builds in his arms. The Zero responds as it always has. Smooth, predictable. But the American fighter does not follow. Instead, the Corsair flashes through the turn, not attempting to stay inside it, not attempting to mirror it. It simply passes through the space and vanishes upward again, climbing steeply with a sound that is less like an engine and more like tearing fabric. Nakamura blinks. He checks his airspeed, then his altitude. Something is wrong with the geometry of this fight. Over the radio, another Japanese pilot speaks up, his voice tight. It is not bleeding speed. That should not be possible. Every American aircraft they have faced so far pays a price for power. The Wildcat can dive, but cannot climb back. The P-40 can run, but not turn. There is always a weakness, always a trade. This aircraft seems uninterested in trading. On the ground at Rabaul, in a low concrete operations room, thick with cigarette smoke, Lieutenant Commander Masatake Okumiya listens as early combat reports crackle in over delayed radio links. The information arrives distorted by distance and interference. Phrases repeat. Pilots talk over one another. But a pattern begins to form. A new American fighter. Heavy, very fast. Difficult to follow in a dive. Dangerous head-on. Okumiya frowns and asks for clarification. Which unit is reporting this? What altitude? What tactics are being used? The answer is unsatisfying. The pilots are improvising. They are doing what they have always done. Turn fights. Vertical maneuvers avoided when possible. Confidence in experience. No one suggests disengagement. Back in the air, Walsh feels the Corsair tremble as he pulls out of another dive. The aircraft complains but holds together. Oil pressure steady. Engine temperature rising but still within limits. The bent wings feel solid, stable. The violent shaking that terrified carrier landing instructors now feels like reassurance. The machine is alive and working. He spots a Zero trying to climb after him, the nose high, the propeller clawing at thin air. Walsh does not turn. He rolls inverted and drops again. The Zero stalls. Just for a moment. Just enough. The Corsair's guns speak again. The Japanese aircraft shudders a line of impacts walking across its fuselage. Pieces tear away. Smoke blooms. The Zero falls out of the sky in a widening spiral. Walsh does not watch it hit the water. He is already climbing again. This is not how the Japanese expect Americans to fight. There is no lingering, no attempt to circle for advantage. The Corsair attacks once hard and leaves. It chooses when to engage and when to disengage. The Japanese pilots find themselves reacting instead of directing. Over the radio, frustration creeps in. Do not chase in the dive, but if we do not follow, they return again. They are controlling the distance. Nakamura grits his teeth. He remembers lectures from before the war, emphasis on spirit, on courage, on decisive engagement. Retreat is dishonorable. Breaking contact invites defeat. Yet every instinct tells him this aircraft punishes pursuit. Below, anti-aircraft crews aboard Japanese transports look up squinting into the sun. They see dark shapes diving and climbing at speeds that make tracking difficult. Their guns open fire, two late shells bursting harmlessly behind targets already gone. On Guadalcanal, Marine ground crews pause in their work and stare upward. They know this sound now. The deep roar. The way it rises and falls in sharp vertical strokes. Someone mutters that the Corsair is earning its keep today. In Tokyo, far removed from the heat and noise, design engineers at Mitsubishi have already begun hearing rumors through unofficial channels. A powerful American fighter with a radial engine larger than anything they have fielded. Thick wings, heavy armament, reports are vague and easily dismissed. American industry produces quantity, not finesse. That belief is deeply rooted. Besides, Japanese doctrine does not change based on rumors. Back in the air, the fight drags on. Fuel gauges begin to matter. Ammunition counts drop. The Corsair pilots maintain discipline. They do not linger. Each pass is calculated. Speed becomes a weapon in itself. The Zero pilots grow tired. Their aircraft demand constant attention near the edge of a performance. Muscles strain. Sweat stings eyes. Another Zero goes down. Then another. Not in dramatic explosions, just sudden losses. A wing detaches. An engine coughs and flames. A pilot does not answer when called. Nakamura calls for regrouping. The order feels strange in his mouth. He has never needed to say it like this before. As the surviving Japanese aircraft turn away, the Corsairs do not pursue far. Walsh watches them go, knowing better than to press too deep. Fuel matters. Distance matters. Discipline matters. The sky grows quieter. Later debriefings will focus on tactics, on mistakes, on missed opportunities. Some Japanese pilots will mention the new fighter's speed and firepower. Others will insist that with proper engagement it can be beaten. There is no consensus. What is missing is urgency. No emergency meeting is called. No doctrine is rewritten. No urgent request goes up the chain demanding changes in training or equipment. The assumption remains that this is an outlier, a rough prototype, a handful of aircraft that will never appear in numbers. The Corsair's landing problems are known. Intelligence reports mention carrier accidents. The conclusion is comforting. An aircraft that cannot land reliably at sea cannot dominate the Pacific. That belief settles in like a closed door. In the days that follow, more encounters occur. More fragments of warning accumulate. Always the same themes. Speed, firepower, vertical control, always dismissed as situational. The war moves on, plans remain intact, and somewhere over the Pacific, the bent wing fighter continues to climb, waiting for the moment when ignoring it will no longer be possible. March 18, 1943. 2:41 p.m. above the Russell Islands south of Bougainville. The heat inside the cockpit is suffocating. Sunlight pours through the canopy, turning the instrument panel into a glare of needles and numbers. Sweat runs down the back of Lieutenant Junior Grade Thomas Hudner's neck as he scans the sky. The engine vibration is constant, a deep rolling thunder that never fades. The Corsair feels heavy today. Fuel tanks, nearly full ammunition belts, tight and loaded. Below, the islands drift past in slow motion. Jungle, coral, water that shifts from turquoise to deep blue in bands. This patrol is supposed to be routine. Escort duty for bombers hitting Japanese supply positions. Nothing dramatic, nothing unexpected. Then the radio comes alive. Bandits, 12+, high, coming out of the sun. Hudner tilts his head back and squints. At first there is nothing. Then shadows begin to move against the light. Dots growing fast. On the Japanese side, the pilots feel a familiar surge of confidence. This time the Americans are not diving in and out. They are tied to bombers, forced to stay, forced to fight on terms the Zero understands. Lieutenant Masao Kato, a veteran with dozens of combat hours, signals his flight forward. This is the moment. The new American fighter will be tested properly, not allowed to dictate distance and tempo. The Zeros descend in a coordinated sweep. Engines howling, wings shimmering, the bombers tighten formation, gunners swivel their weapons. The sky fills with intersecting paths of motion and intention. Hodner feels his stomach tighten. The Corsair was not designed to babysit bombers. It wants room. It wants speed. But orders are orders. The first Zero cuts across his nose, impossibly tight, almost hovering as it turns. The instinct to follow burns through him. He pulls. The Corsair resists. The nose lags. For a heartbeat, the Zero is inside his turn. Tracer rounds snap past the canopy. Something punches the fuselage with a dull thud. Brake, brake, brake. Hodner shoves the stick forward and rolls. The Corsair drops not elegantly, but decisively. The engine roars as gravity and horsepower combine. The Zero tries to follow. It cannot. Below him, the bomber formation begins to unravel. Zeros weave through it like knives through cloth. Anti-aircraft fire erupts from the bombers, bright and desperate. For the first time, the Japanese pilots see the Corsair not as a raider, but as a defender struggling to adapt. Confidence surges. Kato lines up on a bomber, firing in short bursts. Smoke pours from an engine. The aircraft begins to lag behind. Then something slams past Kato's canopy at impossible speed. He jerks his head around in time to see a Corsair streak upward in a vertical climb, guns still firing as it goes. The rounds tear through the Zero behind him. The aircraft explodes into fragments. Kato's confidence falters. The Corsairs are not staying tied to the bombers. They are breaking formation, choosing moments, slashing through the fight instead of circling within it. Hodner regains altitude and spots another Zero lining up on a bomber. He dives again. The speed builds so fast it feels unreal. The control forces stiffen. His vision narrows. He fires. The guns hammer. The Zero disintegrates. The Corsair screams past the bomber, climbing away before anyone can answer. On the Japanese radios, voices rise in pitch. They do not stay. They strike and vanish. They climb too fast. Kato tries to adapt. He orders his wingmen to stay high, to wait for the Americans to come up instead of chasing them down. It is a sensible adjustment. It should work. It does not. The Corsairs never come straight up. They climb obliquely. They use shallow spirals. They trade speed for height in ways the Zero cannot mirror without bleeding everything it has. One by one, the Japanese pilots find themselves out of position, always a second late, always reacting to movement already completed. The bombers release their payloads. Explosions ripple across jungle clearings below. Smoke rises in thick columns. The Japanese pilots press harder. Fuel gauges drop. Ammunition runs low. Fatigue sets in. The Corsair pilots feel it too, but their aircraft demands less finesse at high speed. They fight with momentum rather than delicacy. Kato lines up on a Corsair, at last catching it in a climb. He fires, hits spark along the wing. The American aircraft shudders. For a moment, hope flares. Then the Corsair rolls inverted and dives straight through Kato's formation. Two Zeros try to follow, both overspeed. One loses control and snaps into a spin. The other pulls out too late and skims the water, cartwheeling into foam. The fight breaks apart. When it ends, the sky is emptier. The bombers limp away, damaged but intact. The Corsairs regroup engines, running hot airframes, scarred but flying. The Japanese survivors turn north, shaken. They have lost aircraft and pilots in numbers that feel disproportionate to the engagement. Back at their base, debriefing rooms fill with raised voices. Pilots argue. Some insist the Corsair is dangerous only in certain conditions. Others admit they could not force it into a fight on their terms. The reports go up the chain. Words like speed and firepower and vertical control appear again. This time they are harder to dismiss. Still there is resistance. The Zero has not suddenly become obsolete. Victories are still being won elsewhere. Supplies are still flowing. The war is far from decided. But something has changed. This was not an ambush, not a surprise raid. This was a planned engagement under favorable conditions. And the Corsair did not just survive, it dominated. April 12, 1943. 9:06 a.m. Over the Solomon Sea northeast of New Georgia. The sky is layered today. High cirrus catching the sun, lower bands of haze clinging to the horizon. Visibility is deceptive. Shapes appear and disappear as aircraft cross through thin veils of cloud. The radio crackles constantly now, too many voices, too many warnings arriving a second too late. This is no longer a routine patrol. Both sides know it. On the Japanese side, the order has been clear. Seek engagement. Test the enemy fighter directly. Prove that the earlier losses were circumstantial, not structural. Commanders want confirmation that doctrine still holds that skill and experience can overcome any machine. Captain Junichi Sasai, one of the most respected pilots in the theater, leads the formation. He has seen enough to know something is different, but he also understands the pressure pressing down from above. Reports questioning the Zero are dangerous. They imply failure not of aircraft alone, but of belief. Sasai briefs his pilots carefully. They will not chase in dives. They will force horizontal engagements. They will exploit low-speed maneuvering. Discipline will win. Across the sky, Lieutenant Commander Kenneth Walsh climbs with his section of Corsairs, eyes scanning constantly. He has heard the rumors now, too. The Japanese are adjusting, staying high, refusing bait. This is the escalation both sides sensed was coming. Contact is abrupt. Zeros appear from cloud cover, diving not wildly, but in measured arcs. They do not commit fully. They probe. Walsh recognizes the shift instantly. They want him to turn. A Corsair peels away, and a Zero follows tighter and tighter, forcing the American aircraft into a widening circle. The Corsair pilot fights the controls, sweat slick on the stick. At low speed, the aircraft feels heavy, reluctant, dangerous. Walsh snaps a warning over the radio. Do not stay. Do not turn. The Corsair dives away just in time, the Zero missing its shot by meters. Above them, the rest of the fight fractures. Japanese pilots hold altitude waiting. Corsairs climb, dive, climb again, looking for openings that refuse to appear. For a moment, the sky settles into a tense equilibrium. Neither side dominates. Both sides lose altitude and regain it in cautious exchanges. The gunfire is sporadic. Short bursts, testing shots. This is what Japanese doctrine was built for. Controlled combat, measured attrition, confidence returns. Then a Corsair comes in, head-on. The closing speed is terrifying. The Japanese pilot hesitates. Head-on attacks are risky. Courage wars with instinct. He fires late. The Corsair fires first. The impact is brutal. The Zero disintegrates mid-air, the force of the heavy machine gun fire tearing it apart before the pilots even pass each other. The shock ripples outward. Another Corsair repeats the maneuver, then another. The Japanese pilots realize too late that this is not recklessness, it is calculation. The Corsair can absorb punishment, the Zero cannot. Armor, self-sealing fuel tanks. Structure built to survive mistakes. Sasai tries to adjust again. He orders avoidance of head-on passes. Spread formation, draw them down. But the Corsairs are not drawn. They choose moments with chilling precision. They dive through the formation fire once and climb out. No lingering, no turning. A Zero manages to get behind a Corsair at last, firing continuously. Bullets strike metal. Sparks fly. Smoke leaks from the engine cowling. The Corsair does not fall. It dives. The Zero follows out of instinct, out of training, out of belief. The speed builds. Control surfaces stiffen. The Zero begins to shudder violently. The pilot pulls back hard, trying to recover. The Corsair is already gone. The Zero slams into the sea in a spray of white water. Below, Japanese ships watch helplessly. Gunners fire upward, but cannot track targets moving this fast. Shell bursts lag behind reality. The misjudgment is now obvious to the pilots in the air. The Zero is being forced into situations it was never designed for. Vertical speed, high energy passes. structural limits exposed by raw velocity. Yet the orders do not change. On the ground, commanders interpret the losses through a familiar lens. The Americans are relying on brute force, on engines and metal instead of skill. This cannot last. Fuel shortages will cripple them. Maintenance demands will ground them. Carrier landings will kill more pilots than combat. It is comforting logic. It preserves hierarchy. It delays action. In the air, comfort is irrelevant. Walsh watches another Zero fall and feels no triumph, only focus. He knows the Corsair is still dangerous to its own pilots. He knows landing is still a gamble. But here in open sky, the machine is unmatched. The fight drags on until fuel dictates withdrawal. When it ends, the Japanese losses are undeniable. Experienced pilots gone. Aircraft destroyed beyond recovery. The Corsairs return to their bases battered but victorious. Ground crews rush to meet them, counting holes, listening for rough engines already preparing repairs. Debriefings grow more serious. Words like dominance and superiority begin to surface quietly among American officers. On the Japanese side, silence hangs heavier. Pilots avoid eye contact. Reports are filed with careful language. The Zero is not criticized openly. Instead, conditions are blamed. Weather, numbers, luck. But beneath the surface, doubt spreads. The escalation has failed to restore balance. And the realization is beginning to form that what was mocked is no longer optional to confront. May 8th, 1943. 4:17 p.m. over the skies north of Vella La Vela. The sun is low now, hanging just above the horizon, turning the ocean into a sheet of molten copper. The light is treacherous. Shadows stretch long and distort distance. Engines sound louder in the cooling air, every vibration echoing through metal and bone. This is the hour when mistakes are easiest to make and hardest to survive. Captain Junichi Sasai flies at the head of what remains of his unit. He can feel the strain in his shoulders, the fatigue that no amount of discipline can erase. These pilots have flown too many sorties in too few weeks. The faces in the ready room are fewer each morning. The jokes have stopped. Ahead, black specks rise out of the glare. Corsairs. No one laughs anymore at the bent wings. No one comments on the landing gear. Recognition is instant automatic, followed by a tightening of the gut. Orders come down the radio from ground control, filtered and delayed. Engage if advantageous. Protect the convoy moving west. Do not pursue excessively. The words are careful. Too careful. Sasai understands what they really mean. Losses can no longer be absorbed casually. Every pilot matters now. Every aircraft is counted twice. The formations converge slowly like two predators circling. The Corsairs hold altitude advantage. They always do now. Their pilots have learned patience. They do not rush. They wait for the angle to be right. Lieutenant Commander Kenneth Walsh watches through the canopy, eyes flicking between instruments and sky. He has lost friends in this aircraft, men who survived combat only to die bouncing off carrier decks. But today is not about landings. Today is about leverage. The first move comes from the Japanese. A faint dive meant to draw the Americans down. It is executed cleanly, professionally. Months ago it would have worked. The Corsairs do not bite. They climb instead, spreading out, forcing the Japanese to choose between abandoning the convoy or committing upward into thinner air. Sasai makes the call. He orders the climb. The Zeros respond willingly. Engines, straining propellers, biting at air that offers less and less resistance. The climb feels wrong almost immediately. The aircraft feels lighter than it should. Controls soften. Every meter gained costs more than the last. Above them, the Corsairs accelerate as if altitude is a suggestion, not a barrier. The radial engines roar, unbothered. The bent wings hold steady. At 17,000 feet, the first Zero falls behind. Then another. Walsh picks his target and rolls into a dive. The sun flares across his canopy as he drops. The speed builds. Wind noise overwhelms everything else. He fires once. The Zero explodes the fragments, catching sunlight before vanishing into cloud. Sasai watches it happen. He has seen too much today to pretend this is coincidence. He banks hard, trying to pull his formation into a defensive spiral. The Corsairs do not follow the spiral. They cut across it. Another zero goes down. Then another. This is the moment. Not dramatic, not announced. Just a quiet internal shift as the reality becomes unavoidable. The zero cannot dictate the fight anymore. Sasai feels it settle in his chest like a weight. Years of training doctrine and belief unravel in seconds. The aircraft he trusted with his life has reached the edge of its usefulness against this enemy. He radios for disengagement. The word feels heavier than any he has ever spoken. Some pilots obey instantly. Others hesitate, caught between instinct and pride. That hesitation costs lives. A Corsair dives through a lagging zero and tears it apart. The survivors break away, diving toward the sea, hugging the surface, using every trick left to escape. The Corsairs do not chase far. They never do. Walsh watches them go, breathing hard. His hands ache. The engine temperature needle sits higher than he would like. The aircraft smells of cordite and hot oil. Below, the convoy has taken damage. Supplies burn on the decks of transports. Smoke drifts lazily upward. The Japanese mission has failed. Back at base, the debriefing is subdued. Sasai removes his helmet, slowly placing it on the table with care. His report is honest, painfully so. He describes the altitude disadvantage, the inability to pursue or disengage at will, the vulnerability in head-on attacks, the way the Corsairs choose when to fight and when to leave. Silence follows. Some officers avoid his gaze, others stare at the table. No one challenges his account. Too many pilots have said the same things now. Yet still no immediate change is ordered. The Zero remains the backbone of Japanese naval aviation. Factories cannot retool overnight. New designs exist on paper, not in squadrons. Training pipelines are already strained. Admitting the truth changes nothing operationally. It only confirms what cannot be fixed quickly enough. The turning point has arrived not as a dramatic collapse, but as a realization that the future of air combat has already moved past them. The Corsair lands back at its base on a rough coral strip. The touchdown is violent. The aircraft bounces. The pilot fights it down. For a moment, it almost kills him. Then it stops. The ground crew exhales. Even here, the aircraft remains unforgiving. But in the sky, it has become something else entirely. And the people who once mocked it now know there is no way to pretend otherwise. June 14th, 1943. 6:02 a.m. Off the northern coast of New Britain, dawn arrives unevenly light, spilling across the ocean in broken streaks. Low clouds hang over the water, heavy with moisture. Visibility is poor. The horizon blurred into the sky. Engines warm slowly on airstrips carved from jungle and coral. The smell of fuel mixes with damp earth and exhaust. This is the kind of morning commanders hate, the kind where uncertainty multiplies. On the Japanese side, the scramble order comes early. A convoy has been sighted moving through contested waters. Air cover is thin. Every available aircraft is ordered up, regardless of pilot fatigue or maintenance status. Lieutenant Masao Kato tightens his harness and feels a dull ache in his hands. He has slept little. The ready room was quiet all night, men lying awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to rain strike tin roofs. No one speaks much anymore. As the Zeros lift off their engines, sound strained. Parts are worn. Fuel quality is inconsistent. Mechanics have done what they can, but there is only so much to work with now. Above the clouds, the sky opens suddenly. Corsairs. They are already there. Higher, faster, spread wide. The shock hits immediately. There is no gradual build-up, no probing, no time to assess. The Corsairs dive as a group, coordinated, disciplined, their silhouettes unmistakable even through cloud shadow. Kato feels the instinctive jolt of fear. He pushes it down and rolls into a defensive turn. Around him, other Zeros do the same, the formation collapsing into individual fights almost at once. The Corsairs do not engage individually. They strike in pairs. One dives, fires, climbs. The second follows seconds later, hitting the same area from a slightly different angle. The timing is ruthless. A Zero explodes in midair. Another trails smoke and drops away. Japanese radios erupt with overlapping calls. Brake left, pull up, dive away. Nothing works for long. The Corsairs are not improvising anymore. This is doctrine now. Energy fighting refined through weeks of combat. Every pilot knows his role. Every move supports the next. Kato tries to gain altitude, hoping to find breathing room. His aircraft responds sluggishly. The engine coughs. The climb rate is nothing like what he remembers from training. Above him, a Corsair accelerates upward effortlessly, as if mocking the attempt. The American pilot rolls over and comes down head-on. Kato fires, early panic creeping into his trigger finger. His rounds pass wide. The Corsair fires once. The impact shatters Kato's left wing. The Zero snaps sideways. For a frozen instant, the world spins. Then the ocean rushes up. Kato never reaches the water. Around him, the battle dissolves into chaos. Zeros scatter. Some dive for the clouds. Others hug the sea. The Corsairs pursue selectively, choosing only the cleanest shots. There is no symmetry anymore. No sense of equal exchange. Below, the convoy takes losses. Bombs fall unchallenged. Transports burn. Escorts maneuver frantically, firing anti-aircraft guns that cannot keep up with the speed overhead. At Japanese command posts, reports flood in. Contradictory, fragmented. Entire sections wiped out in minutes. Pilots missing. Convoy damaged beyond expectations. Commanders issue orders faster than information can support them. Reassign units, shift patrol zones, increase altitude coverage, reduce engagement unless necessary. These are desperate decisions layered atop one another, each one eroding coherence further. On the American side, the mood is grim but focused. Walsh lands after another sortie, hands shaking as he pulls the Corsair down onto the strip. The aircraft bounces violently, nearly ground, looping. He fights it with every ounce of strength he has left. The engine cuts. Silence crashes in. Ground crew rush forward. One points at a hole near the cowling. Another wipes oil from his hands and nods. The Corsair is damaged but repairable. Almost always is. In the operations tent, maps are marked and remarked. Intelligence officers note the lack of coordinated Japanese response. The thinning of experienced pilots. The increasing tendency to disengage early. This is no longer a test. It is exploitation. Back at Rabaul, tempers flare. Senior officers argue behind closed doors. Some demand immediate acceleration of new aircraft programs. Others insist the Zero can still dominate if pilots adapt fully. Adapt. How is the unspoken question? Training hours are down. Fuel shortages limit flight time. Replacement pilots arrive with a fraction of the experience veterans once had. Reality presses in from every side. By midday, the sky belongs almost entirely to the Corsairs. They patrol at will. They intercept when they choose. They withdraw untouched when fuel demands it. Japanese pilots still fly, still fight, still die. But the balance has tipped past recovery. In the quiet moments between sorties, American pilots talk in low voices. About friends lost to bad landings. About aircraft that try to kill you if you lose focus for a second. About how strange it feels to trust something so unforgiving. Yet when they climb back into the cockpit, there is no hesitation. The Corsair gives them something no other aircraft has. Control. For the Japanese, the shock has passed into something colder. A realization that confusion is no longer temporary. That desperate decisions cannot compensate for a machine that dictates the fight from the first second to the last. As the sun climbs higher, smoke columns mark the sea and jungle alike. Losses are counted, names are crossed out, and somewhere deep within, command structures built on certainty, cracks begin to widen. July 22nd, 1943, 11:38 a.m. Over the skies west of Bougainville. The air is thin and unsteady at altitude sunlight, bleaching color from the world below. The ocean looks distant and unreal, as if painted rather than lived upon. Radios hum with low static. The sound has become constant, a reminder that nothing here is ever quiet anymore. This sortie was never meant to be decisive. It was meant to restore order. Japanese naval aviation planners had revised patrol schedules and interception zones repeatedly over the past month. The original plan had been simple once. Establish air superiority, protect shipping lanes, bleed the enemy through superior skill. That logic had guided every major decision since the opening strikes of the war. Now that plan exists only on paper. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Yamamoto leads what should be a strong mixed formation, fighters high, fighters low. A layered defense designed to absorb attack and respond in kind. On the briefing board it looks sound. In the air it unravels almost immediately. Corsairs appear first as glints of light above the formation. They are not massed. They are spaced deliberately, each aircraft occupying a different slice of sky, each pilot aware of the others without clustering. The Japanese formation tightens instinctively. Yamamoto knows this is a mistake, but cannot stop it in time. Years of doctrine demand cohesion under threat. The Corsairs dive, not all at once, not chaotically. One section drops first, firing into the upper fighters. Another follows seconds later, targeting the lower group as they attempt to climb. The layered defense collapses into interference. Japanese pilots block each other's escape paths. Calls for altitude and direction overlap. Orders cannot be heard clearly through the static and engine noise. Yamamoto tries to impose structure. Hold altitude. Do not pursue. But the words arrive too late. A Zero dives after a Corsair out of reflex. Another follows. Both vanish downward, never to return. Above, the Corsairs climb again, reforming with practiced ease. They have already moved on to the next pass. This is the collapse made visible. Not a single moment of defeat, but the failure of a system to function under pressure. On the Japanese side, the plan depended on predictability, on forcing the enemy to react, on setting the terms of engagement. The Corsair has erased that possibility. Lieutenant Commander Kenneth Walsh leads his section through another attack run, heart rate steady, despite the chaos below. He has flown enough of these now to recognize the pattern. The Japanese still fight hard, still take risks, but their actions no longer align. Each pilot is making his own decisions inside a structure that cannot support them. A Zero crosses Walsh's path head-on. He fires. The Zero breaks apart. Walsh climbs without looking back. Below, Japanese ships maneuver erratically. Without reliable air cover, captains scatter, abandoning tight formations that once maximized anti-aircraft defense. This only makes them easier to isolate. Bombers arrive later and find targets already disorganized. By midday, fuel becomes the deciding factor. Japanese pilots already low break away earlier and earlier. Some never find their way back. Navigation errors compound losses. Exhausted pilots misjudge distances and ditch at sea. At command posts, the language changes. No longer victory and dominance. Now it is containment and delay. Messages go out requesting reinforcement that does not exist. Other fronts demand the same resources. Factories cannot produce replacements fast enough. Experienced pilots cannot be conjured out of air. The original plan assumed time. Time to train, time to adjust, time to grind the enemy down. The Corsair has removed time from the equation. On American airstrips, Corsairs land in waves. The landings are still violent. Tires screech, aircraft bounce. One ground loops and clips a revetment, crumpling its wing. The pilot climbs out shaken but alive. Even now, the aircraft punishes mistakes, but those mistakes no longer outweigh what it delivers. In the debriefing tent, officers mark Japanese losses and note patterns. Fewer coordinated responses. Less aggressive pursuit. Increasing reliance on disengagement. Someone remarks quietly that the enemy is flying like they are trying to survive rather than win. No one disagrees. In the air, the Japanese pilots feel it most acutely. The moment when training offers no answer. When experience cannot compensate. When every option leads to exposure. Yamamoto returns with less than half his unit. He removes his gloves slowly, hands trembling. He knows this was not bad luck. Not poor weather, not individual failure. It was the plan itself that collapsed. The Zero has not changed. The pilots have not suddenly lost courage. The battlefield has changed around them. and there is no path back to the assumptions that once made everything make sense. August 29th, 1943, 3:54 p.m. Over the waters south of New Ireland, the afternoon heat presses down hard, thick, and unmoving. The air feels heavy even at altitude turbulence, tugging at wings that have already flown too many hours. Radios hiss constantly, the sound now inseparable from flight itself. Every transmission feels urgent, even when it is not. This sortie is an attempt at recovery. Not victory, not dominance. Recovery. Japanese command has shifted its language carefully. Orders speak of preservation of force, of minimizing losses while maintaining presence. New tactics have been circulated hastily. Avoid prolonged engagements. Attack only when conditions are favorable. Use surprise. Disengage early. The words sound reasonable. In practice, they offer little. Lieutenant Kazuo Tanaka leads his section with grim focus. He is younger than many who flew these routes months ago. Most of those men are gone now. Tanaka has read their reports, listened to the surviving veterans speak in guarded tones. He knows what waits above. The sky answers him almost immediately. Corsairs patrol high, again silhouettes sharp against the pale blue. They do not maneuver aggressively at first. They simply exist there, an unspoken threat occupying space the Japanese can no longer claim. Tanaka orders his pilots to stay low, skimming beneath the patrol line, hoping to pass unseen. The sea glitters below sunlight, reflecting off wave crests in blinding flashes. For several minutes, it seems possible. Then one Corsair peels away. It does not dive directly. It slides into a shallow descent, adjusting angle with effortless precision. Another follows, then another. They are not rushing, they are positioning. Tanaka feels the trap closing and orders a break toward cloud cover. The Zeros respond instantly, scattering engines pushed hard. The Corsairs dive. The first pass is devastating. One Zero erupts in flame. Another loses its tail and vanishes downward. The Corsairs climb away before return fire can find them. This is the new rhythm. Attack, withdraw, reposition, repeat. Japanese attempts to counter are frantic and disconnected. One pilot tries to draw a Corsair into a turn fight. The American refuses, diving through and leaving him exposed to a second attacker. Another pilot climbs steeply, hoping to meet them head-on. The Corsair fires first. The Zero disintegrates. Tanaka shouts orders that no longer shape the fight. Each pilot is alone now, reacting moment to moment. Doctrine has become irrelevant at this speed. Below, Japanese surface ships move cautiously, spreading out to avoid presenting clustered targets. Without reliable air cover, their movements are hesitant, constrained by fear of sudden attack. On the American side, coordination tightens further. Corsair pilots communicate constantly short, precise calls marking targets and positions. Their tactics have hardened into habit. They know what works, and they repeat it without hesitation. Lieutenant Commander Walsh flies again today, despite exhaustion etched into his face. He knows this aircraft still demands everything. He knows one bad landing could end him as surely as enemy fire. But he also knows the sky is his. He watches a Zero try to escape into cloud and follows just long enough to fire once. The Zero shudders and falls away. Walsh pulls up immediately, unwilling to linger. There is no glory in pursuit anymore, only efficiency. Back at Japanese command, frustration curdles into desperation. Engineers are pressed to accelerate improvements. Field modifications are suggested. Weight reduction, armament tweaks, training adjustments focused on disengagement rather than victory. None of it addresses the core problem. The Zero was built for a war that no longer exists. The pilots feel this acutely. Each new engagement confirms what they already know. Even when they survive, they return shaken. The airframes come back riddled with holes that should have destroyed them. The margin for error has vanished. Tanaka lands hours later with only one wingman. His aircraft shudders violently on touchdown tires skidding across the strip. He shuts down the engine and sits in silence, hands still on the controls. In the debriefing room, his report is short. Contact Heavy losses. Enemy disengaged at will. No one asks questions. Across the Pacific. American commanders note the change in Japanese behavior. Less aggression. More avoidance. Shorter engagements. Fewer coordinated responses. These are not signs of adaptation. They are signs of attrition. Attempts to recover what has been lost continue for weeks. Sorties are flown. Pilots fight. Aircraft fall. But the initiative does not return. The Corsair remains overhead, patient and unforgiving. Its early ridicule has evaporated completely. No one jokes about its landing gear anymore. No one questions its wings. For the Japanese pilot still flying the war has narrowed to survival within a sky that no longer belongs to them. And with each passing day, the distance between what might have been and what now is grows wider. October the 3rd, 1943. 10:11 a.m. Above the waters north of New Britain, the sky is almost perfectly clear. No clouds, no haze, a rare gift in this theater of war. Visibility stretches for miles, every detail sharp and unforgiving. The ocean below is calm, broken only by the faint wakes of ships moving cautiously, as if aware they are being watched. For the Japanese pilots lifting off this morning, clarity brings no comfort. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Yamamoto sits rigid in his cockpit, eyes fixed forward. He has flown long enough now to recognize patterns, not from manuals, but from absence. Fewer aircraft on the line. Fewer experienced voices on the radio. Replacement pilots who speak too formally, too cautiously, revealing how little time they have in the air. This mission is defensive. Purely so. Protect a supply movement already behind schedule. Avoid unnecessary losses. Do not engage unless absolutely required. The words are spoken plainly, stripped of earlier bravado. Almost immediately, the Corsairs appear. They are not attacking yet. They circle high above their engines, a distant growl. They are content to wait. Yamamoto feels something settle inside him then. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. The enemy does not need to rush. Time favors them now. The Corsairs begin to descend slowly, methodically, tightening their presence without committing. Japanese pilots respond by tightening their own formation exactly as training dictates, even as they know it will only limit their options. A Corsair dives suddenly, firing into the edge of the formation. A zero erupts in flame. Before anyone can respond, the Corsair climbs away. Another follows seconds later, then another. The Japanese pilots attempt to break apart, but every movement feels late. The Corsairs are always already there, always already positioned to punish. Yamamoto tries to climb. The engine strains. The aircraft shudders. He watches a Corsair above him accelerate upward as if gravity has less claim on it. In that instant, the truth becomes unavoidable. This is no longer a contest of skill or courage or tactics. It is a contest of capability. The Corsair controls altitude, controls speed, controls engagement. It dictates when combat happens and when it ends. Yamamoto hears a scream over the radio. Then silence. Another zero vanishes in a burst of debris. The Japanese formation dissolves. Pilots scatter in all directions, not in coordinated retreat, but in instinctive flight. Some dive toward the sea. Others aim for distant clouds that will not save them. The Corsairs pursue selectively, striking only where the outcome is certain. There is no frenzy, no waste. Every shot counts. Yamamoto dives hard, hugging the surface, spray kicking up beneath his wings. He feels the aircraft vibrating violently, pushed beyond what it was ever meant to endure. For a moment, he believes he might escape. Then a shadow crosses his canopy. A Corsair roars past, guns flashing. The impact shreds Yamamoto's tail. The zero snaps into an uncontrolled roll. As the world spins, there is no surprise left. Only clarity. This is what it feels like when a war changes shape and leaves you behind. The zero strikes the water and disappears without ceremony. Hours later, the survivors land. Fewer than expected, fewer than hoped. The ready room is silent. Helmets are placed on tables. No one meets anyone else's eyes. In the command office, the report is read aloud. The language is careful, but the meaning is unmistakable. Enemy air superiority is complete. Engagements result in disproportionate losses. Objectives cannot be secured. There is no argument this time. No deflection, no talk of adaptation. The realization has arrived. Not with a single defeat, but with the understanding that nothing short of a miracle could reverse this balance. Factories cannot deliver fast enough. Training cannot accelerate enough. Fuel cannot appear where it does not exist. The Corsair has not just entered the war. It has ended a phase of it. The sky is no longer contested. It is owned. December 11th, 1943. 8:26 a.m. over the Bismarck Sea. The morning is cold by Pacific standards, the air thin and sharp at altitude. Sunlight glints off metal wings already scarred by months of use. The ocean below looks distant and indifferent, a flat expanse that has swallowed men and machines without pause or memory. Corsairs patrol high, widely spaced engines, humming with practiced confidence. There is no urgency in their movements now. No need for sudden dives or aggressive probing. They are here because they can be, because nothing meaningful can challenge them anymore. Below, a Japanese supply convoy struggles forward under minimal escort. The ships maintain wide separation captains, knowing clustered formations only invite destruction. Anti-aircraft crews stand ready, scanning a sky they no longer believe will protect them. The Corsairs descend, not dramatically, not in a rush. They pick targets with calm precision, one ship at a time, one pass at a time. Explosions ripple across the sea. Smoke climbs skyward in dark columns. The convoy breaks apart almost immediately, each vessel attempting escape on its own. There is no coordinated air response. What fighters remain are grounded by fuel shortages, maintenance failures, or simple absence of trained pilots. Those that do launch arrive late and stay only briefly, engaging at long range before breaking away. They do not climb. They do not pursue. They survive or they die. On one battered airstrip inland, a small group of Japanese pilots watches the distant smoke rise. Among them is a young lieutenant fresh from training his flight hours, barely enough to fill a logbook page. He listens as older men speak quietly, not of tactics, but of inevitability. They no longer discuss how to win. They discuss how long they can continue. In operations rooms across the region, maps are updated with grim efficiency. Shipping losses are marked in red, air losses in black. The ratio tells its own story. There is no need to embellish it. The Corsair has reshaped the battlefield in ways that cannot be undone. Its early flaws are now footnotes. The brutal carrier landings, the accidents, the pilots lost before the aircraft was understood. Those costs are already paid. What remains is the result. American air power now moves with confidence across the theater. Bombers strike deeper. Reconnaissance flights linger longer. Ground operations proceed under a protective sky that rarely wavers. Japanese commanders understand the implications fully now. Without control of the air, every movement becomes hazardous. Every shipment is a gamble. Every reinforcement arrives diminished or not at all. The realization comes not as a sudden collapse, but as a narrowing of options until none remain that lead forward. At a quiet base, Lieutenant Commander Kenneth Walsh lands his Corsair for what may be his final combat sortie of the year. The landing is rough, the aircraft bouncing violently before settling. He shuts down the engine and removes his helmet slowly. The ground crew approaches familiar faces marked by exhaustion and routine. They inspect the aircraft out of habit. Minor damage, nothing that will not be fixed. Walsh looks at the bent wings, the long nose, the scarred cowling. He remembers the early days, the mockery, the fear, the whispered doubts. None of that matters now. The Corsair stands ready for the next sortie as it always does. Across the sea, Japanese pilots gather in smaller and smaller numbers. Training flights are shorter. Fuel is rationed. Replacement aircraft arrive too slowly to matter. New designs are spoken of in abstract terms, their promises trapped on drawing boards and in test hangars far from the front. The war has moved past them. By the end of the year, Japanese naval aviation no longer plans operations around air superiority. It plans around avoidance, around concealment, around delay. The moment when that shift became irreversible is difficult to pinpoint precisely. There was no single battle, no singular disaster. only the accumulation of encounters where the outcome was decided before the first shot was fired. The Corsair does not linger in memory as a symbol of elegance or ease. It is remembered for something else. Relentless presence. It took what was once dismissed as flawed engineering and turned it into dominance through refinement, discipline, and industrial force that could absorb early failure and emerge stronger. For the Japanese pilots who first laughed at its wings and landing gear, that laughter feels impossibly distant now, like a sound from another life. The sky has been claimed, the cost has been paid, the chance to adapt has passed. Nothing remains to be debated.